let's try this again and see what happens. My phone's doing whatever it wants tonight. Um, we've had a lot of questions this evening about hooks and selling and Graphghans and backing. Ultimately, I've gone in and I've put a post in that talks about safety, and this is one of the reasons I think that a lot of people sell only certain things. Like if you want to sell toys, then you go in and you sell toys only, because there are certain, the eyes and the whole gamut of things that need to be tested. And that's one of the reasons that I really like Graphghans, because there's not part that come off. There's not hi Debbie. There's not removable parts. There's not really a lot of choking hazards that are involved in Graphghans, and especially because those that are marketed toward children, um, there are guidelines like the flammability, the choking hazard, and that is one of the reasons why I have gravitated toward those, because you don't have to get them tested as rigorously. As long as if they're marketed toward a child, you have the choking hazards under control and the suffocation hazards. So that's why locally around me, and the guidelines, since I do ship worldwide, they're 2 inches apart. So a lot of times when I add if I choose, or the customer wants a backing on it, then I will um, I will tack it every 2 inches. And if you tack it every 2 inches, that kind of gets the suffocation guidelines, because originally when I started selling locally, I really didn't think a lot about it. And then a lady made a pacifier holder, and a child choked, was strangled, and actually passed away, unfortunately. And this poor woman's name was dragged through the paper, and her store, and she lost her house. She got sued, and it was very tragic. So that's what made me really look into having insurance and what the safety guidelines are for what things. And I think that's another reason too why I don't sell a lot of stuffed animals or anything else. Like I'll sell some 18 and older novelty items that are not meant and targeted toward children. So that's one thing you need to look into. Even gifting, from what I have been told, it varies from area to area on gifting. So that's another reason why, if you are making a gift and you are going to back your Graphghan and it's a gift, I would tack, because I was told that it's still a liability because it's handmade and it came from you. So, hi Angela, hi Rita, late start here, hi Erica, there we go, hi Tasha. So I did put some safety guidelines in a post today. If you go into the group and you type in safety, it'll tell you if you make a stuffed animal or you make a certain pattern. Now the pattern makers won't be held responsible for this, but you will. So if you're making something that's a stuffy, hi Carrie, if you make something that's a stuffed animal, a lot of times they will say, do not use safety eyes. I know what what it says on the package, but they say, if it's for a child to, stitch everything on, make sure that nothing's going to come off, make sure it's not flammable. There's guidelines, and you're supposed to have each and every one of the things that you make tested, and the information's in that safety post that I made. Please take the time to look at it, because like I said, Lady By Me was sued, and unfortunately the parents lost their child, and because of a pacifier holder. And I don't want something like that to happen to you guys on either aspect, to get sued because you made something or to lose a child. So, that is why I don't like backing. Tunisian's heavy anyway, so that's another reason I don't really back. But if you do, the extra work that goes into it is worth it. And I know that a lot of people will reflect that in their price as well, because tacking every 2 inches is pretty labor intensive, to say the least. one of the other questions that we had that was pretty popular, we do incorporate our borders here. Why do we incorporate the borders into a pattern? It is so much easier to incorporate a non-curling border and then to start on your project and not have that curl than to have to go in and attach a regular single crochet or regular border to it, because what happens in Tunisian is you go up 2 hook sizes so your project doesn't curl. Now you're going to get the same gauge with an H hook and single crochet as you get with a J hook and Tunisian simple stitch. So you're going to need to remember that if you're using the J hook and you've made your Graphghan and oh crap, you didn't add a border, to go back you're going to need to go down to an H size hook, because if you don't, then it's the math is not going to work out. And that's a little bit difficult too, especially for a K hook, because a lot of people with a K are getting a higher height than you are width wise. So I find that's a little bit harder with gauge too, where if you incorporate your border, you have all that in there, and it's so much easier for your pattern when you're done if you need to just lightly block it and you're good to go. Thank you, Erica. She put the link in. Another thing is we are working on the tea cowl that's going to be going on here pretty soon, and let me see if I can turn this the correct way since I'm backwards from everybody. We're going to be doing a rectangle shawl, and the shawl we're going to be working it lengthwise, so this is the way that it will be worn, and that's our border. And it's hard to see it. It's not it's curling a little bit more because today I just had it shoved in a bag and it was a little bag, so it was tightly just shoved in there. Once we do this, it's not gonna, yours is not gonna curl like this. It's just the way that this has been stored. I'm using the Yarn Bee, that DK non-pill that I showed the label for, and I'll show that when we do the video for it. And hi Cece. And on top of that, we're going to be doing tutorials and everything else. So, like I said, yours, this is what it's going to look like. And I like the drape of this. I actually took this to physical therapy for my husband, and everybody was touching it and seeing how soft it was, and they were absolutely in love with it. And the color doesn't show up as well as I would like for it to, but I really like this color. Melissa said, how do you change color on a bobble stitch? I'm doing my Tunisian graph, but it's a different color, and I'm doing it ringed in bobbles. I'm just wondering how to do the color change. I did my color changes the last stitch of the TSS when you pull up your next loop to start. There's two methods to this thinking. Some people are changing color and then doing the bobble, and then their next stitch is the TSS, and that way the bobble will pop over the color a little bit and be seamless. There are other people that were doing it a little different than that. I like so that the bobble pops out and it's the first thing that you see. So I'm not doing the TSS and then the bobble. If you do your TSS and you pull up with a new color, the last TSS, you have the new color pulled up, that will give you the color change you need for your bobble. That's the way that I did mine, except for when I was doing the bobble stitch Graphghan. I actually will put a picture in the group in a little bit, because what happens is you do the last bobble and then you do a TSS and you start your next block. So if you're doing them in blocks, like the word Graphghans that have like your breath, you know, you took my breath away, we'll say. And then those were starting and ending in a TSS, and then you start your next block. If you do them all in one piece, I was finishing in the TSS and then starting my next color with the new color and doing the TSS. So I had the bobble that was gray, and then I would start my new block in the yellow and then do my yellow bobble. So it depends on if you are you doing blocks or you're just doing a panel. I guess that would help me figure out how to help you, Melissa. Hi, Shonda. Hi, Gloria. Yeah, I got on here late. My phone was doing some crazy stuff. This is what I was showing. This is the new, this is the tea cowl that we're going to be doing in the group next. And that's the border. Goodness gracious, the lighting in here this evening. And then this is the center and the Tunisian knit stitch. This is going to be vertical or horizontal, but we are going to work on it vertically. I found that it's easier and you don't have to cast so many on instead of like casting on enough for a blanket and then working up. So we're going to work on this and we're going to twist it. There's a few stitches involved, so we are going to do the tutorials for the stitches, and we're going to have everybody work a swatch up with a few of the stitches. Now, what you do with the swatch after that, you can frog it, you can work with, you know, you can frog it and use your regular yarn. You can use regular yarn since 4-ply worsted weight yarn is going to be a little bit thicker, so you can get a feel for the stitches. For those of you that are familiar with the Tunisian honeycomb stitch, using the Tunisian simple stitch, the Tunisian purl stitch, if you've ever worked a knit stitch, we're going to be using the knit stitch. And there is another stitch we're going to be using, and it's been called two different things. It's been called a slanted stitch and a twisted stitch. So I am going to go as old school as I can go to find out the actual name that it's taught in books, because I know how confusing it is for people to go on YouTube and look a stitch up and then realize that if you go back and somebody that's a teacher or teaches has learned this from the beginning and you talk to them and you're like, oh, I did this stitch and this is what it's called, and they're like, oh, heck no, that's not what that's called. Bonnie, do they deliver to Canada? I don't have a Hobby Lobby where they live. I'm not sure. Bonnie, you and I will figure something out, since I need you to work on this because you're a mod. Bonnie says, I like the border stitch. Gloria said, that's beautiful. Melissa says she loves the tea cowl. She can't wait. In a panel. If you're just using it in the panel, I would do two things, Melissa. I like to do the TSS and then work my bobble in the new color. That's my preference, because what happens is if this is your background color, then your bobble kind of sticks out over the background color, and I think it looked cleaner. Now, there are some people that will work the TSS and then the bobble. So what I would do is just play around with, you know, I would do a bobble with the TSS first and then the bobble and see what you like. Again, if you work the TSS, if you work the bobble and then you're working the TSS, what happens is, especially when you finish your bobble, you have the yarn over and pull through for the TSS that's after the bobble. So one side you're going to have the yarn that's going to stick out, and then the other side you're not, because a bobble is made up of two stitches. I like the bobble in the new color, but you may like it the other way, so I would play around with it a little bit. I like the way it pops, but it's up to you, because you want to keep your stitch count perfect. But I like the way that the bobble on the right hand side, as I was working across, if I did the bobble in the new color, and then on the left side when you do it, your bobble kind of sticks out over the second, over the TSS after you've made the bobble. It kind of sticks out over it, so you can't really tell as much. So that's the way that I preferred it. You may like it a different way, Melissa. Try both and then let me know what you think. But I like the bobble and then the TSS. That was my preference. Gloria said that's beautiful. Bonnie said she likes the border stitch. Melissa said, I did see some DK weight yarn at Joann's the other day. Yeah, I haven't tried anything from Joann's as far as their DK weight. Unfortunately, the Joann's that we have that's by me, like, is so small that it's not even funny. What yarn are you using there? This is, I don't even have the tags. There we go. This is Yarn Bee Soft and Sleek DK, low pill fiber, and the color's Peacock. And I know that's all backwards, Gloria. Melissa, do you know how many balls we need to order? Hi, Kathleen. Melissa said, thank you for your help. I'll try it. Hi, Kelly. Bonnie says, I don't have Joann's either. Michael's and local yarn stores. Yeah, Bonnie, we'll figure out something to get some of what we're working on up to you. Actually, let me see, where was it? Do you know how many balls we will need to order? I do not. I actually, the whole object of this was to, I have like this much yarn left, and I am thinking, you know, that's not a lot. So I am going to gauge how much we're going to need. The thing about it is, it's going to depend on how tall you are, how many balls you're going to need. So, with that being said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish this skein up tomorrow or tonight, depending on what time we get done here. And then I'm going to gauge from there, and then that way I can go in and for everybody's 2 or 3 inch increments, I can say how many skeins you're going to need, because I know everybody is different heights, because I am super short, and I know that some of you are super tall compared to me. Everybody's taller than me because I'm only 4'10". Let me see so far. This is just a rough estimate, but, and this is not blocked, so, because once you do your project, it's going to block a little bit, it's going to grow some. I got about 13 inches to a skein, so if you say 1 foot to a skein, and you're 5 foot, then you're going to need 5. Yes, and if you have not answered on the height poll, please go and answer how tall you are. But I'm figuring for this, we're going to need 1 skein per foot. So if you're 6 foot tall, you're going to need 6 skeins. If you're 5 foot tall, you're going to need 5 skeins. You know, if you're 5'6", you're going to need like 5.5 skeins. So I would grab 6. Like I said, when this is blocked, it will be a little bit larger. I have not made it that far yet, so we're still designing. And ultimately, when you block, you don't want something that's really going to stretch this out either. You just want to lightly go over and either A, you can steam block this, and I know so many people are scared of steam blocking. I'm going to do a video on how to steam block once we have ours done so that you guys can follow along. But I know that a lot of you are scared to death of steam blocked. You don't want to do it. You don't have the equipment. So I am also going to talk about wet blocking, where you can, there's two different ways to wet block, and I'm going to show you each of those. So this cowl's going to have several parts to it, like a lot of ours do, and I'm hoping to get all of the videos and everything else and everything back in the swing of things. As many of you know, my husband had surgery and was in a cast, and he's not allowed to drive, so I have to take him to all of his appointments and everything else. So the end of December, beginning of January was crazy, but you know, we just roll with the punches and do what we got to do. So yeah, and I have another video that I need to get put up from the previous tea cowl that we did on the corner of the border that we were putting on. So I kind of have a lot of work ahead of me. But I will have better gauge measurements shortly, and I will let you know. But pretty much the way that it stands, you know, it's going to depend on your height. So I'm figuring, to be on the safe side, I would grab 6 if you're over 5 foot. If you're slightly over 5 foot, I think once we block it, you're going to be good, but it's going to depend on your height too. Do we have any more questions on that? But yeah, this is the border that we're doing, and I am really, really, really liking this. And this is the knit stitch in the center. And like I said, when I took this thing out, so many people were touching it and talking about how soft it was, and I am using a J hook with this yarn, and it calls for I think a 4.5. Yeah, it calls for a US 7 4.5 millimeter hook, but I'm using the J, which is 3 sizes bigger. And let's see, I really don't think there's too much confusing about what we're doing on this pattern. I do think that working up the swatch with the stitches, a few rows of each of the stitches that we're going to do, is going to help, because it's going to show you where to see your stitches, because there's a couple places, like where you work the slanted stitch, it's when you pull up the slanted stitch to make it, it kind of pulls the TSS down a little bit, because what it does is it causes you to work these two really close together. So it's kind of easy when you're first starting to either skip the slanted stitch or, you know, not see your Tunisian simple stitch. But I'm going to go over all that in the video, and like I said, we're going to do a swatch in the regular yarn, and that'll give everybody a chance. I'll upload each video, and then we'll put each one of the video links in a poll, and it'll say, you know, this is part 1, part 2, and part 3, and then we'll get everyone to do the swatch. You can dive in if you want to of the pattern, but I would recommend doing the swatch and, you know, the couple stitches, especially if it's something you haven't done before. Gloria said, I love that so much, would love a cardigan like that. I have no idea where to start. Actually, Gloria, I think that I really don't think a cardigan using this pattern would be that hard. I think that you would need some basic measurements, and so if you did the border section along the bottom, I got it upside down. That's why I can't find the border section at the bottom. If you did the border section along the bottom here and did a panel that was your back, and you measured your favorite cardigan and just did like 10 rows of the border and then, you know, did 2 front panels with the border down the inside of them, and then, you know, stitched it up the side, and then just did your armholes in the Tunisian knit stitch, and measured that, you know, the length of the arm and the width, and then just stitched your arm panels together. And then you could also use something like this for the cuff, but I don't think it would be that difficult. I kind of like a tighter cuff. I think this would give a little bit of a looser cuff without doing decreases. But I still like the idea of this down the front of the cardigan, because I really do like this border. I love how this is coming out. And like I said, unfortunately this has been tossed in a bag, and so the bottom border is rolling. But as I lay it on my lap and I work on it, it lays flat. So, do we have any questions on anything that I've said so far? I know that's a lot of information for everybody and a lot of different stitches, but don't get scared, because this is something that's super easy. And I know that, you know, I know that there's been so many people that are like, oh, I bought this pattern and it says beginner and I was so lost. And that's not what we want here. And I know that you guys can do this. And even me making this, you see my little stitch marker, this is where my border starts or ends on this side, and then my, you know, the Tunisian knit stitch starts. And then on this side I have the same thing. I have a stitch marker, and you guys can move this thing up if you need to, or whatever. This is going to be so easy. It's not going to be one of them patterns that you have to go back and watch the video over and over. I have a few patterns like that where there was stitches on there and I was like, okay, I think I got it, and then you do a row and then you're like, oh my gosh, how do I do that stitch again? And you had to go back and watch the video a few more times. So this is going to be something that's easy. It's going to be like a Graphghan where you have to count, but I think that's with any pattern. You know, you need to count and know what's going on, but I think this is going to be great. And if we have people that cannot get a hold of a DK weight yarn and match gauge, depending on where you are, we might be able to get a couple yarn angels together and see about shipping you yarn to certain places. But we'll see how that goes. Does anybody have any questions so far? Well, that's good. Let's see, what else? Oh, I know that you guys live vicariously through me and my cakes, so I did get my Rhea cake for last month. I decided to go with a different cake, so I got the frozen cake, which was offered that month, and I absolutely love this. I'm so super excited about seeing how this works out. And another thing is, people were, if you want to work this up in a different yarn, I am going to give the gauge that I get for this, And then two, I am going to talk about how to change the gauge a bit, because I know some people want to use different yarns that are different thicknesses, and somebody, oh excuse me, somebody even mentioned about using the hobby twisters. Now, the hobby twister is thinner. Let's see if I can. The hobby twister is about half of this. So, you know, your gauge is going to be much different. So I'm going to talk about how to change the gauge and how to do a gauge swatch again for this. So everyone should be good with what they get. And this should be pretty self-explanatory on, you know, what you need to change. Like I said, this really doesn't look too big, but what this is doing is, since I like something when I get chilly that's going to go up around my neck a little bit and be able to fold down. So actually this will be able to come up and fold down a pinch and still come down to your bum area. I wanted something that's going to be a pinch longer, because a lot of the shawls that I've seen, some of them are pretty small. They literally go from your neck down to like the middle of your back, and I kind of get chilly, so I did want something that's going to go down my back some. A lot of times too in Pennsylvania here it gets chilly and we sit outside a lot, and I don't like just half of my back covered, and I don't want to go in the house and get this great big blanket and drag it outside either. Especially because then they start to stink because we have a lot of bonfires and all that. Yeah, Erica said shawl and a ball. Yes, I'm going to talk about gauge so that you guys can figure all of that out. And I do, and this is another reason why I do suggest working your stitches up in this swatch, because a lot of the finer yarns, it's easy to lose a stitch when you haven't worked with a thin yarn in a while. It's easy to not be able to see where we're going. So that's another reason kind of why I like something that has a longer gradient of change for the color, because it's going to be easier to see where your stitch is. So do we have any questions so far about any of that? But this is, like I said, this is going to have, it's going to be pretty easy to change your gauge for what you need. And, you know, I know that a lot of you do not like doing gauge swatches, but this is one of the things that when you work up the gauge swatch, the border that's in here is, it's a little bit wider than the knit stitch. If you notice, the knit stitch is kind of tighter, and of course the knit stitch always curls as you're working across the top, and that was one of the things too. The knit stitch is a shorter squatty stitch, and I know that this is the one thing that people are going to say, oh my gosh, this isn't working out. And this would be the only reason why, is we've talked in here a lot about if you're a yanker, you're a rider, or a lifter. If you are any of these, if you are a lifter, when you do your border over here, I want you guys to purposely try to make the border on each side just a pinch tighter. I'm not saying, you know, yank this thing down dramatically, but I'm saying that if you are naturally a lifter, you're going to want this to be just a pinch tighter. And if you are a yanker, when you go in and, oh goodness, it's kind of hard to see this way. If you go in and you make your knit stitch, the knit stitch is a little bit of a squattier of a stitch. I want you guys to make sure that you pull the knit stitch up so that it is riding along with your border stitches. Good morning, Terry. So, like I said, there's going to be tutorials for all of this. I'm just saying, you know, as far as a heads up, it's just like when we do the honeycomb border. You know, we need to change our hook size out for the bottom because it'll flare out a little bit. This is the same thing with the sides. When you get to the sides here, these stitches are just a pinch taller, and the knit stitch, as we all know, is a shorter, squattier stitch. So when you make your knit stitch, you want to go into the stitch and pull up, and make sure if you're a yanker, you're not yanking this thing back down, because what's going to happen is your project's going to be tall on the sides, and then it's going to sink down a little in the center. Now, blocking will help that, but it's not going to help it as much as if you yank it, you know, if you're not consistently making the stitches the same height. And like I said, with a knit stitch, it is a squattier stitch, so you want to make sure you're getting the height that you need. Other than that, like I said, this is super straightforward. There's only a few stitches involved. Once you get the stitches down, you're not going to have to go back and watch the videos over and over again. This is going to be very straightforward and super easy. And that's what I liked. I wanted something that, you know, everybody was going to be able to do, and they're not going to say, oh, I got to worry about this, I got to worry about that. Master these couple stitches and you're good. That's it. And they're easy stitches. Do we have any questions so far? Have I lost anybody? Do you not know what I'm talking about? I did notice for this, I did go up 3 hook sizes, so it calls for a 4.5, so the next size up would be a 5, then a 5.5, and then a 6. Melissa, when we do a honeycomb border, am I supposed to go down a hook size? Yes, for your top and the bottom, and the reason is the Tunisian purl stitch is a pinch wider. And what happens is when you have your Graphghan and it's the Tunisian simple stitch is all straight up and down, when you make your purl stitch, it's just a pinch wider. So what happens is if you don't go down, what happens is the bottom of it gets a little bit wider, so then the bottom of it flares out. So when you're done, the top and bottom 10 rows, just it flares out. It's not a lot, but it's something that's, I like to go down the hook size, because after trying to figure out why in the world mine were flaring at the top and the bottom, that is why. It's because when you make the purl stitch and you hold the purl down in the front, it's just a pinch wide. It makes it just a pinch wider, and all them pinches add up. Terry, when is this going to start? This is actually going to start the second week of February. I am going to get some of the swatch videos up before, but this part is officially going to start the second week of February. Please pop onto the poll and give your answer if you did not, about how tall you are, because that's going to be one of the things that I include, is the sizing and how many skeins you're going to need. Hi Linda. So please pop onto the poll so I can see like what the most popular size is, so that I can properly name these, you know, extra small, small, medium, large, extra large. Yeah, Melissa, most of the time I use the I for my honeycomb border, and then the J for my project for the Tunisian simple stitch. We did have one question too about the way that this is going to be worked. This Tunisian cowl is going to be worked this way, because I felt like chaining this way was going to be too daunting. If everybody had to cast on like 300 stitches, a lot of people are like, I do not want to sit here and chain 300 and then cast on 300, because if I mess up, I got to frog too much. It's too much time. It's just too much. So I figured working it the short way across is going to be better. Now, with that being said, if you use a variegated yarn, to use cake yarn, one side is going to be gray and then the other side is going to be pink when you wrap it around you. Where if I had designed it the other way, then the color would have went up. And I think that would have looked nice. But like I said, from everything that I've gathered from you guys with polls and conversations, you did not want to chain like 300. So this was the easiest, and that's why I'm doing it in this color instead of something like this for right now. I'm not saying something like this wouldn't look nice. I think that this, something like this, you know, if you had the gray over one shoulder and then the pink over the other, I think it would look very Harley Quinn. I think I would like it. I do. But I also think that for the purpose of designing this too, for you guys to be able to see the stitches, if I did it in the different colors, that it would have been harder for you guys to see. So that's why, another reason why I'm using a solid instead of something that's color changing or variegated. I want the stitch definition to pop. Thank you, Erica, for putting up all of the links. You're fantastic. So, please, guys, pop onto the poll, scroll down the page a little bit, and you'll see it, and pop on what your height measurement is, and that way I can say what I can do, like a flyer that's going to say like what size is what, how many inches, and that'll help me gauge with the yarn how many skeins you guys are going to need. Like I said, I am assuming the most you are going to need is 6, and that's like if you're 5'6" and over. But at this point, like I said, I'm getting like 13, 14 inches with this. So the math may be a little less because I haven't used my whole skein yet. Because it's taking like 260 inches to do a row, which I know sounds like a lot. But I actually worked out all the math for this, and we'll be good. I would rather you guys buy over and then keep the receipt and be able to return one, or, you know, be able to make something else, than to go to the store and then the dye lot's changed, or God forbid they stop making it and you get there and you're like, well, I need one to finish it, and then so so do we have any more questions? Anything that you guys would like to see in here that you're not seeing? Can everybody in here find what they're looking for? I know that we have new members, and we have right-handed, left-handed, and closed caption videos. They are, if you go to the tabs along the top of the group, if you're on a phone, it says like announcements and albums and files. You want to go under the albums. It doesn't say right-handed for the right-handed. It says something else. Videos for, you know, those that are right-handed. But that's where our videos are. We do have a sizing file under our files that talks about what size and how many stitches you should have, and what size hook you get. If you guys have problems reading that, please let me know, because the first one is how many stitches or how many inches, and then the second one is what size hook and how many stitches to achieve this measurement, and then what size hook. And like I said, I know that there are a few people that are like, I am getting 4 rows and 3 rows high, or 4 stitches wide and 3 rows high to an inch. I'm not getting the same thing. You can pop in there and see if your gauge is more true to what I get for a K, then you're still going to be able to get the math. Jessica, can you give the yarn again? Yes. Ugh. This is Yarn Bee Soft and Sleek DK low pill fiber. This is from Hobby Lobby, and it calls for a 4.5mm crochet hook. And this color that I'm using is Peacock. Where was the one that I wanted to talk about too? Let me see if I can find it in here real quick. A lot of people that I've talked to, I have talked about this Tunisian Crochet Basic and Textured Stitches Volume 1 by Petra. This book I really like. It's very informative. It's really going to help with a lot of things. I do like to use this book when it talks to using stitches and what they're called, because this does revert back to a lot of the old school teachings. And like I said, this is why it's so confusing when you go on YouTube, because like the smock stitch was originally taught as 2 stitches that are purled together, and that's why Creative Grandma, I use her video when I teach. And then people were like, I tried it and one video purls stuff together and the other one does not. The other video, I'm not saying it's not a great video, but it's been called the modified smock stitch. It's been called a modified honeycomb. It's been called a few different things. I like to go back old school and find out what books called it years ago, because I think it's more standard. You know, it's so difficult, especially if you'll talk to an older crocheter and say, I'm doing this stitch, then they know what that is. Where if you say, oh, I'm doing this stitch, and it's called this stitch, but it wasn't taught that way, and then you show them your project, and they look at you, and they're like, that's wrong, that's not, it's not that it's wrong, it's just that they're calling it something nowadays different. This is hi Viola, hi Amy. This is another example of what I'm talking about. In the book, in 24, this is page 19, and this is 24 as it's taught. The Tunisian slanted stitch is worked as the TSS in the front bar, but the hook will be inserted from left to right with the tip upwards. The thread will slant to the right. What happens is when you put your hook in the opposite way, it twists the stitch. So I've seen it called the slanted stitch, and I've seen it called the twisted stitch. It just depends on what way you're doing it. The twisted stitch, now, the one that I have seen taught has like a purl bump on it. And the reason it's got a purl bump is because you are taking your hook from the top and putting it in upside down, and it's causing a twist in the back. So that is why I am calling what we're doing the slanted stitch instead of the twisted stitch. If you look at the picture here in the book, how she's putting the hook in this way and then she's twisting it, it's causing a twist, which is causing a bump. Where the slanted stitch that we are doing, you're going in from the opposite side, and it is twisting the stitch, but it's not, since you're not going in upside down and then twisting the stitch, it's different. Because in TSS, when we're going in, gosh, I know I'm not going to be able to see this, but when you go in through your stitch, instead of going forward, we are going to grab the stitch, and it's hard to see. Let's see if I can do it this way. I'll pull these off. When we're going into the stitch, it's sticking down low, so we're going to pull it up, and this way you can see the stitch. And what they're doing is they're going in from the right to the left, so you're going in backwards, and you're grabbing your yarn. Oh goodness, it's so hard to do this backwards. And you're pulling through, and what it causes it to do is it causes the yarn to slant. And I know this is super hard to see, but there's my yarn, and it's slanted over, and that's what's causing this right here. This is a Tunisian simple stitch, and then this is the slanted stitch, and it's joining the two together. Where the twisted stitch, it's taught on YouTube 2 different ways, and that's why I like using the book so much. When they teach it on YouTube, they're actually going in this way, but you're twisting your hook, and it's not exactly twisting, it's making a purl bump. It's not doing it the same way as if you were to, even if you were to pull this loop up and grab it and go under this way and pull through, it's pulling it to that angle. Where the other stitch that they're doing, you're going in over the top and down, and then you're twisting, and it's creating a bump. I really don't know how to describe the difference, but we are going to be calling it the slanted stitch in here. And if you have problems and you have this Tunisian crochet book, you can refer to it as it's taught in here. Because, like I said, if you look at the slanted stitch in here, it's going at an angle. Whereas if you look at the twisted stitch, it's got the purl bump. We are not doing that. I have seen the twisted stitch or the slanted stitch done 2 ways. One way I found a little confusing, but it made sense to cast on or to work it this way. Some people are actually taking the stitch, and they're pulling it up so that you can see it, and then they're grabbing it with a hook. Oh goodness gracious, it's hard to do it this way. They're pulling it this way, and then going under. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it on camera like this. You're picking it up, you're going under, and you're twisting your hook so that it's coming out the right side, and then you're making the stitch. I did see another woman do it, and I don't know, I think she said she had arthritis really bad. She was pulling the stitch up. This is the stitch that we're going to work into, and she actually twisted it sideways and then went in. And like I said, I will have close-ups of these as we do this in the group. But we are going to be using the twisted stitch, as it's called in the Tunisian Crochet Basic and Textured Stitches Volume 1 book. I hope that all makes sense. I know that's a little confusing. Hi Stephanie. Denise, sorry the angry icon, it was a mistake. No one could be angry with you. Angela said she got her book ordered today. Slants like the knit through the back. Yeah, it's going to. Page 19, stitch number 24. Sorry guys, gotta go. 3 a.m. comes quickly. Good night. Good night, Bonnie. Yeah, like I said, I know that if you go on YouTube, there's the slanted stitch, and it's taught completely different. And there's 2 different ones, and one Ken Guzman teaches, and it's got the purl. And another one somebody else is teaching, and off the top of my head I can't even remember who I saw, and she's basically pulling the stitch up and then twisting it and calling that the slanted a twisted stitch, but it's not. Stephanie, when you do the video, could you do slow motion? Yes, I am going to. When I do the video, all of the videos here are very slow and very beginner friendly, and I try to do them so that people can keep up with them and do them very slow. You will be able to keep up with this, no problem. I'm trying to get my stitch put back on here so that I know where I'm at. But again, this will be super easy. And like I said, the only thing you guys are going to have to worry about is if you're a yanker. Please, 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 if you are a yanker, when you make your knit stitches, go under and pull your stitch up so that it rides along, because this is just a pinch taller than the knit stitch. The knit stitch is a little short and squatty, so if you're a yanker, you really don't want to take your finger and yank this stitch back down, or when you go to block this, your top's going to sag a little bit. But I think you guys will do fantastic. This is super easy, beginner friendly, so you guys will be great. Yes, and Eric can slow it down a little bit more if needed, but I don't think you're going to. I think it's going to be super self-explanatory here. Do we have any questions so far? And I think too, like I said, working up the few rows of the swatch that we're going to be doing is going to help you significantly, especially if you are using like a number 4 worsted weight yarn, and let's see, that'd be a K or an L hook, whatever you're more comfortable with, and work your swatch up. This is a pattern of two stitches, and you really don't count your first stitch on your right side. That's the loop that's on the hook, and then the second stitch that's on your other side, you work that. You're not going to work that in the pattern. So we are going to chain an even number, because you're going to have your first stitch, and then we're going to start the pattern, and then when we end, we're going to end with a simple stitch, and then we're going to work into both loops of the last stitch, and work like we always do for our final stitch. And like I said, I know that a lot of this sounds confusing right now, but it's because we're not actually doing it and you're not following along with the video. But it's much easier than it sounds. Erica said, loving your curls tonight. Thank you. I decided to leave my hair down when I went to the gym today. It was wet, so I like it. Do we have any questions about any of the T-cal that I've talked about? Do we have any questions about hooks? Do we have any questions about something else that you guys are working on? It doesn't have to be something in here. Something you guys would like to see in the group. Erica put the poll up above, the link for the poll, and if you can, please go click on that and put in how tall you are, because that's going to help me with the sizing and how many skeins we're going to need to be able to figure all that out. What else? I really don't think there's too much else. I am looking forward to getting this skein finished up, and then figuring out the math and the gauge and everything else to be able to help you guys out better. Like I said, at most, you guys are going to need 6 skeins, but we'll see. When you do the double border, do you start the new color with a honeycomb border or a row of TSS? I think it's personal preference. When you watch the video that I did that said, when you're working your honeycomb border up against your Graphghan, I think is kind of the way that I worded it. And it shows how to go under both of the stitches to pull up the last stitch of the color, or to purl that stitch. You're purling the 2 stitches and then working on. You can do it that way. I like to use the TSS. So when I do the double border, I like to start with the loop that's on your hook, and then the purl TSS, purl TSS, purl TSS, and then when I work that last stitch, I figure my last stitch as a TSS. So there will be areas where you'll have 2 TSS's, and then there will be areas where you have the TSS and then the purl and then the TSS. I like to end it with the 2 TSS's together, but I've worked it both ways. It just depends on where you want the pattern to go. I found too that when you change colors with 2 in the purl, sometimes you can see that little piece of color come through, and I kind of didn't like that, so I like to start and end with a TSS. But that's my personal preference. I just didn't like that little dot of color that came through. So, do we have any other questions? I hope that we can get a lot of people that will be joining in the T-Cow. And like I said, this is not blocked. It's been thrown in a bag, and you can tell that it's just been treated like a bad t-shirt, like laundry lately, and I don't like that at all. But, and of course I'm short, so, but this does lay flatter than it shows. Well, if we don't have any more questions, I am going to start to wrap up this evening. Tomorrow, let's see, tomorrow afternoon to tomorrow evening, I will have this section done, and I will let you guys know what math I got and everything else. I really don't want to go in and set up the T-Cow in our events too soon, because it really only stays for like 2 years, and I'd rather have the math in the group first before we start setting it up. And then, because I also want to make sure we post the videos in the main group, and that way they can be put under a certain flyer that's going to say like rectangle shawl or whatever, and we can just loop those stitches in there. I'm kind of on the fence. A lot of people have asked me to put a couple of my patterns on Ravelry, and I don't mind putting the patterns on Ravelry to sell, so that people could get a PDF. It's just, there's a good bit for me to figure out before I can do that. Hi Beverly, hi Paige. Yeah, so there's a little bit that's got to be involved before I can, you know, put patterns up on Ravelry and do all of that. Although I think it would be nice, because we have had a few patterns in here that we've had up for a while, and then they've timed out and people have asked for the pattern again so they could make it. And because the 2 years has gone by, they're not in the group anymore. So that may be something that I look into late spring, early summer. It's hard when you know, yes, Erica would have to do it for you. Yes, you would. It's hard, you know, to be on the group and work and and do everything. People, so I don't think sometimes people realize how much work goes into a group, um, and how many hours a day. That's why we've had post approval on for a little while, because just things have been a little hectic, and I don't want the group overrun with anything. That's the way I was in another group today, and they got spammed with 3 or 4 people with watch parties, and that is one thing that I'm so glad we went in and we turned all that off. So there is no watch parties going to come up here. I'm not going to say we're never going to have spam, but you guys have been absolutely fantastic for reporting it, and we've been on top of it to get it removed. We've been very fortunate in that aspect, and if we cannot be on for whatever reason, then we have the post approval on, so that makes it nicer too, that you guys don't get flooded with things that you do not want to see. So if there's no more questions this evening, I'm going to pop off here. Please, please, please go onto the poll and comment how tall you are, because that will help me in designing the tea cow that we're doing. And we still are going to have another section too that's going to come up with a picture of this, and we're going to have a few people vote on names, and then the ones with the most likes, we're going to go in and we're going to post those, and then people can like them from there, and we'll see what this thing's going to be named, because I have no idea what to even call it yet. So all I know is that it's going to be the rectangle shawl, and I definitely don't want to call it that. Beverly, I still see the button for the watch party on here right now. Yes, you can see it, but you can't start one. You can only start one if you're admin. So, thank God. Yeah, because nobody wants to watch the presidential debate, or somebody speaking a different language doing something that's not what we do. This is Tunisian crochet, and that's the way we're going to keep it. We don't, you know, people come here to escape from politics and sports and their husbands and or their wives, and that's the way we'd like to keep it. This is Xanadu. So, like I said, there's going to be a post with this picture of this, and we're going to be taking some names. That's going to be going on in the next week, and I will get the videos up, and a DJ party, and we're going to get the stuff up for the swatch, and you guys can follow along with that. And like I said, you do not have to have the yarn yet for that. All you need to do is have a hook that's 3 sizes bigger than what your yarn calls for, and just the number 4 worsted weight yarn that is scrap or whatever. But I do recommend a solid color so that you can see your stitches. So, without further ado, I hope that you all have a fantastic evening, and I will see you next Wednesday. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to post them in the group. This is a teaching group, so if you guys got questions, please post. I know what it was like to try to find stuff when I was first learning, and it was very difficult, and there are not a lot of Tunisian groups out there. So, thank you guys. Thank you all for joining me, and have a fantastic evening. So, again, if there's any questions, all of these posts, or all of these lives, are also posted in our albums under past lives, so you can go in and you can watch what you've missed. So I look forward to seeing you all in for our Tunisian cow that's going to be starting here, and you can check out our topics area. Thank you so much for joining me this evening, and have a great night, guys. Bye.